Oh my god. So hot.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Dose Plus and the Insight segment. Today we have a very interesting episode where we're discussing the journey back home, the Gambian diaspora returns. As we know, the diaspora plays a critical role in our country in terms of socio-economic development. But in this episode, we want to talk about a very specific portion of our diaspora, those who decide to come back to their country and to contribute in another way. We have two great guests with us today, Jainaba and Ismail, and I'll allow you guys to introduce yourselves. So please, Jainaba, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on the show. My name is Jainaba Njie. I was born and raised in the Gambia. So I left when I was 18, worked in the U.S., went to school in the U.S. To study electrical engineering, and then later stayed for 5 years. I could go deeper to why I stayed. And then 2020, I decided to move home. And COVID happened, so then decided to do my MBA. From there, moved back. So yeah.
Nice. Thank you. We're happy to hear you and to hear a lot more about that journey. And then to our Dr. Ismail Badjie, who is family to the Daily Dose.
Yes.
We would like to hear a little bit about your return back home. I'm sure our audience are very familiar with you, but for those who are not.
Oh, thank you. Congrats on the show.
Thank you.
Doing a great job so far. So yeah, Ismail Badjie. I was born in Banjul, Perseverance Street, families from Afdai. I left Gambia when I was very young. My dad's a retired diplomat now. So we actually moved back to Gambia when I was 7. So my first recollection of Gambia was actually in 92. And I only lived in Gambia from 7 to 17. And then I went back to the USA. So I oftentimes tell people 10 years is formidable, 7 to 17. And I left with a one-way ticket because initially coming back home wasn't an option. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's who I am. Went to the USA. I've been there most of my life. Studied chemistry for an undergraduate, and then went into the medical profession. Got a doctor of pharmacy. Worked in the USA for about a decade, and then something about this place, this continent, brought me back. But just in a nutshell, yes. So I've actually lived more in Gambia as an adult in the past 5 years than I have my whole life.
Wow, nice. Wow, that's quite incredible. So it's a bit of a different story between the two of you. And then for me, I was born and raised in Copenhagen, Denmark, but I lived between Denmark and the UK, where I did my A-levels and bachelor's in England. But I have been in the Gambia for the longest time now. I've been back for almost 3 years, and this is the longest that I've been in the Gambia as an adult. And like you said, that call to the continent, that connection. And I think one thing that we all have, and it will come out through the episode, is that we made an intentional effort to come back home. And I'm really curious to know, why did you decide to come back? Because a lot of the time when we think about immigration in our continent and even in our country, it's usually people going for opportunities elsewhere. But I know with your stories and also mine, we saw opportunity in our country and we came here to get that. So please tell us a little bit about how that was for you, Jainaba.
Yeah, so I guess for me, I never intended to stay. I've always wanted to make an impact here. I mean, I grew up in the 90s, so we were in the dictatorship here. And I think just seeing problems around me, I always thought that maybe I could hopefully one day help solve one of them. And one of them was power, because I grew up, there was a lot of load shedding. I mean, now it's better, but before it was very noticeable. I think our parents did a really good job, like shielding us, from it a little bit. So I think I went to the US because I wanted to help solve the power issues in the Gambia. So I went to study electrical engineering. And when I graduated in 2015, 2015. I think we were going through some issues still here. And so I decided to just stay and get experience, because when I came for holidays, I did some research in between while I was in college. And then I saw that, there's NOAC here, but we still had a lot to, improve on. And I wanted to learn from somewhere that already, had the infrastructure, and I could gain a lot of knowledge and bring back. So when I graduated college, I stayed in the US. So I was working as an electrical engineer there for 5 years, though I couldn't get to work in the transmission side, which is, where Gambia's infrastructure is. But then I was working on the distribution side. And so working there, I did try to look into solar, because that was something that was coming up. And I thought that on the distribution side, at least I don't have to deal with NOAC or, which is a government entity. I could try to do my own thing. So once I mastered designing solar systems for buildings, and I decided, okay, now is the time to move back, so that, my initial mission, I could go back and, do it. So 2020, I moved back January 1st.
Hey.
It was a new decade,
a new time,
new beginning.
COVID too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I had no idea COVID was happening. I even watched a documentary about some flu pandemic or whatever. But yeah, so I moved back, and I wanted to start my own renewable energy company. Of course, COVID happened, but even before that, it was a lot. I don't know if I should get into it more, but having to go to Pura, different stakeholders, the government, and just finding out that whatever has to do with power generation has to go through NOAC. So I think those things kind of deterred me a little bit, and then COVID happened. So being an engineer, maybe I questioned my business side. So then I was like, maybe I should go back and look into business school and learn about business, and maybe I can be more stronger on the independent side and come back. But yeah, so I've always wanted to come back home. I just feel like we're the change. If we don't do it, who will? I mean, we see all the other people coming into the country. They see the opportunity, and I just wanted to be the Africans changing Africa. So
Yeah. And you bring in some important points in terms of you coming, and you had this issue that you saw growing up, which was power, electricity, right? And you wanted to come and contribute towards that, and you went through the steps with the stakeholders such as Pura and NOAC, wanting to be part of creating that impact, but you had some hindrance. And I know that a lot of people who want to come back home and strengthen the sectors, not necessarily take away, but actually to give and gain, they face some of those challenges. I would be interested to hear, in the line of work that you've done, Ismail, what have the challenges been and the opportunities that you found, and how have you overcome them? Because we know that you're doing quite incredible work here.
Yeah, no, I think my family engineered my homecoming subconsciously for me. And I think it's important because growing up in school, I did Mrs. Ndao till grade 9, did Gambia High, graduated in Gambia High. They didn't teach me love of nation. That's just the reality. I left. I knew I was leaving. But I come from a home where my father has been a civil servant his whole life. He served Jawara, served Jammeh, served Bara in the beginning. My older sister, Fatim, came back home, was minister. So I think understanding my privilege made me realize the responsibility I had. And America is what it is. I tell people, yes, every single hour that I'm in Gambia, I'm losing $6,000 because that's what I'm worth in the USA. If I came from a family that depended on me for their daily bread, I won't be able to come home. So my parents laid the foundation for me to be able to sacrifice. So which is why I think acknowledgement of privilege and understanding responsibility is the same, but also anger. I feel like entrepreneurship is criticizing something by creating something else. And I didn't come up with that. Margaret Wada, who's like an amazing entrepreneur from Senegal, she said it. And I was like, yes, that's true, because you see something that you're not happy with. You have two options. Complain about it or create an alternative and be willing to put everything on the line until you see that through. So a level of defiance. Also, I was very successful very early in my career in the USA, but I felt unfulfilled. So what a lot of people consider the American dream, great car, great career, great life, every single day I was driving to this small white town in North Carolina, managing like revenues of $16 million a year. And I used to drive 1 hour. And I remember sometimes when I'm driving home, I'm wondering, what am I doing here? Right? Nothing wrong against white people, but the same things that I'm doing in my sleep. You know, my grandmother died at 56 years old from diabetes and hypertension. And there's a thread there too, where I didn't understand that it wasn't normal for somebody to die at 56 from diabetes and hypertension. So I just feel the journey back home, I knew it was going to be hard. But from day one, I signed a personal contract with myself because naturally, if you are thinking about how hard it's going to be, don't come home. But also, honestly, I didn't come home for Gambia. I feel more African than I do feel Gambian. It's nothing against Gambia, but I saw the opportunity Africa had and Gambia being a familiar terrain to start. Because I've never defined success from a Gambian perspective. I don't think I'm even successful. There's only 2.5 million people. There's really only 1 million adults. And if you remove people in the diaspora, your market is probably about 700,000 people. There's more people in Surulere in Nigeria, which is a small neighborhood, than there are adults in the Gambia. So it's very small. So I just came, and luckily I decided also I was going to build in public because I think that does something. It makes you vulnerable. But I started sharing my story, why I was coming home, what I'm building. And sometimes that's uncomfortable. But once again, my background, I knew who I was. I knew what I wasn't. And I've been building in public, falling in public, fighting in public, but still working. So the why has kind of stayed the same.
And you bring in some very important points in terms of like the journey of moving back. I know for me, when I wanted to move to Gambia, and this was very early on, I think I was 15 years old when I had that realization that I want to be back home. And it really came from that thing of like the immigration patterns of my parents. My parents weren't expats, so they went to Denmark as working class people and had working class jobs, right? And they emphasized on the importance of education, especially for my mom. It was like, you have to educate yourself so you can go back to Gambia and make it better. I had to come here and leave my family so I can take care of my mom and my dad and everyone else and make sure you guys are educated because I don't want you to have that burden that I had. And you talk about that, right? The privilege of maybe having the opportunity not to have to take care of your parents because that infrastructure was already there. And my mom still and my dad live in Denmark and they don't have that same opportunity that I have where I can just come back because of my educational background and my transferable skills, and they're still marketable here, right? To come back. But one thing that I know that I also had to be very conscious about is the privilege, right? When we have lived in the global north and Western societies, we know what it's like to be the minority and to be marginalized and to be discriminated against. So when you come back here, it's like a shift, like you're part of that like 1%, and then you are now the minority, but in another way. So you need to make sure that when you have that power in terms of you can have an impact in another way and you have a voice that's maybe more amplified than others, how do you now use that to create impact, to create change, but also carry folks along and not act as you are a monolith. Like I am Aisha and I want to move back to Gambia and I want to solve Gambian's issue. I don't have all of the solutions. And I think that an argument that I'm faced with a lot when I go into meetings is that, yo, mom, yo, hamulo dara, yo, hale out nga, like, yo, you have no idea what you're talking about. And I think it's a lot of times because of this idea of folks from the diaspora have very good intentions, but a lot of times come with that European lens and think that is going to work in the Gambia. And I feel like, I'm sure in your work, you've been confronted with that, of that epiphany of how do I now unlearn what I know to be true and really just humble myself and know that I am in a state of like apprenticeship. I need to learn the context, I need to learn the country, I need to learn about the continent. And I would love to talk about that like wider, like African continent more, because I really resonate with that also. It's not just Gambia, it's the continent as a whole. But the privilege part, I think, is a very important conversations for us to talk about as folks from the diaspora and as minorities in this country and privileged people. How do we navigate that to create change? Because we can't do it alone.
I think for me, like this saying, knowledge is power, like really resonates with me because, you know, I got access to maybe knowledge that people didn't have. And so you having that knowledge gives you the opportunity to use it or create things. So if you come back home and you see that maybe a lot of people don't have access to it, I think one thing I've been doing is trying to share that knowledge on maybe social media, LinkedIn, or just people I talk to. I also think that, like you mentioned, in terms of like knowing the context, that's something I am still struggling with, because there's a different language that's spoken in Gambia, right? How you speak, especially talking to elders, and maybe a lot of institutions are ran by more elderly people. And coming from the U.S., where you're taught to be outspoken, being able to express express how, your opinions on things and correcting people. I think coming back, you see that, okay, like this is an example, like this might not work here. People can get defensive, and there's a disrespect culture as well. So I think for me, knowing is trying to find a way how to give that knowledge back, not only to my peers, but to the senior people in these institutions as well. Because sometimes how you deliver it, like you mentioned earlier, can be like, oh, you're from the diaspora, what do you know, da da da. So I think that is something I am trying to figure out still.
And how has it been like in terms of also you learning from that side? And because I've had those experiences where I really came with an idea of what I thought change should look like and be like. But do you mind putting on the headphones? Change should look like and be like. But when I came here, I noticed that no, some of the ideas that I had were very wrong, right? And some of the assumptions that I had were wrong. And one of the things I came on holiday in Gambia in 2019, and there was like a workshop. I think it was the Woman Boss. And there were these young people talking about development and what they think change looks like in Gambia. And ignorant Aisha was looking at that like, wow, these people are so sharp. They're so intelligent. I didn't know that there were people like this on the ground. And there are like really sharp folks here who have exceptional capacity, who have never even left the country, but they're so smart. And for me, like just the fact that that was a surprise to me just told me about like my unconscious bias and the fact that I have to also take a step back, unlearn, and bring them in if I really want to create any type of impact here. Have you had any of those experiences?
Yeah, I had it like recently, like I went to the Alcala of Burfoot.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm having a bias because I'm going more on the rural area, not expecting like to meet someone. I know I'll meet a leader, but maybe someone who's very well versed in the law and how the structure of how things work here, and just being very literate and well spoken. And I think for me that was like a shock a little bit, but I was super impressed. And after just having a conversation with him, I was just so energized, just knowing that actually there are leaders out there who know what they're doing and who are very knowledgeable and actually can help, fight. Because I was there for a personal issue, and they were there to educate me also about the system here that I didn't know about, that I'm still learning about. And so, I think that we shouldn't just judge people based on their education or stuff. I think a lot has to sometimes do with experience and exposure. Me coming back here doesn't necessarily mean I know all the laws or even know the National Development Plan to T. I think people maybe who are here and maybe have to use it or go over it over time, whether you're educated or not, maybe you need to know about it due to solving conflicts or so. So I think you should not really have bias when it comes to like, people who are here versus you, and just knowing that there's a system, unspoken system here that you need to integrate yourself, and maybe just putting yourself back into society is important as a diasporan, right? I think sometimes we come and we're just within our circles. And I think one lesson that I'm learning is that to step outside your circle and then trying to integrate with others who've been here, and that's the fastest way to learn.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. How has it been for you, Ismail?
Yeah, no, so I think there's two thoughts. I think being agile doesn't mean you have to conform, because I'm also of the school of thought of, no, I'm not going to change. I'll be agile, meaning I'm still going to move forward. I'll know how to navigate around the system. But the moment you conform, I think you do a disservice to the nation. So I really see Gambia as 2050 Gambia. I'm playing the 2050 Africa game. So most of the systems that we have in place were not designed to let us succeed as a nation, because Gambia had a flawed design from the get-go. And the psychology of Gambians during inception, they did not conceptualize or plan us coming home as diasporans with exposure, intellectual capital, financial capital. The only thing that came from outside in was a white man. And automatically, due to our subconscious, you elevated that to a level. So even the migration patterns now, us diasporans, there's still a level of threat, because they know that we see that things need to be different. But if we judge Gambia based on the Gambian adults, we're doing a disservice to the nation. So no matter how something is frustrating, I most of the time say, I'm looking at the 10-year-old Gambian, that's who I'm building Gambia for. Nothing are wrong against people who've had systems in place. Most of our laws are outdated. Gambia in general is outdated. The concept of Gambia alone is so far behind. And diasporans that can come home, we do have a responsibility to not conform, because conformity is almost like peeing on your leg and telling you it's raining. Happens a lot, and they'll gaslight you to think you are off or you are not of, when it's like, no. The reality is a lot of our problems is because people who had privilege did not care enough. And most people are so uninformed that there's a level of indifference.
Yeah.
And I think that's why if you look at all the countries that are leveraging diaspora intellectual capital, that are leveraging not only financial capital, we treat diasporans the same way we treat donors. We want their money, but we don't want them to influence anything about our daily lives. Right? So yes, you become nimble. I think you become nuanced. You understand the language of the people, but you still move forward, and you still work towards like the 2050 Africa that hopefully Gambia will have a say, because right now we're insignificant in Africa's agenda moving forward. And even in healthcare, I tell people it's in 2030, it's a $258 billion market in healthcare. So we could start from Gambia, win Gambia, and then win Africa, because that's the opportunity too. I'm not a philanthropist. I didn't do this. I'm not running a nonprofit. Right? But I think psychologically there's a lot of unlearning that we need to do, and we need to change our relationship with people in the diaspora.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And for me, it's really that thing of unlearning, because I feel that when you come back to the Gambia, you have this unique superpower, I would say, because a lot of us do come from, countries where we are the marginalized. No matter how successful you are, even if you're in the States, you're still a Black person living in America. And we know what that means, right?
Yeah, you can, and I didn't even mean to cut you off. There's certain things that I will never be able to be and do in America, even though I have an American passport. Most of the times when people see me, they care more about what school I played basketball or my athletic ability anyways. And no matter how successful I am, I would never be able to have the impact in America than I would in Africa.
Exactly.
So that's...
And then because we have those two lenses, where you have the lens of, the context there, the context here, you're able to like have this transnational identity, and then that can actually create real impactful change in your country, regardless of what sector you're in, right? And I think that's something that's very unique to us diasporans. And as you've said, a lot of times the diasporans are seen as donors or funders, right? The remittance is what we hear about the most. When we had this issue of Clause 14 being removed from the elections bill, the argument was, well, the diaspora contributes a lot. It's not about our contribution. I think a lot of times what we're seeing as like the Gambian diasporans' identity is what they bring into the country in terms of remuneration. But there's so much more. And especially with, I think, second generation Gambians, we're coming back with another mission. We're coming back creating businesses. We're coming back investment. We're coming back creating CSO, some folks are, right? So I think a lot of the things that you're both saying are quite interesting, and it speaks to that unique superpower that we have as folks from the diaspora, especially born and raised or just raised in different contexts. We have this ability to connect the dots and to bring those, our parents, the first generation of immigrants, forth and in this new era of what the diaspora looks like. Traditionally, as we've talked about, it has a lot of times been about remittance. As Ismail mentioned, the diaspora are seen as funders or donors, but we're much more than that. Now we're bringing in remittance that some people are calling social remittance. So it's knowledge, it's skills, it's capacity. Those are the things that we're bringing into our countries. And you see a lot of countries in the continent or on the continent that are leveraging it and are very intentional about it. We even see the AU, they've called the diaspora the sixth region, right? You have Ghana, the year of return. You have countries like Benin. You even have Sierra Leone. You have many others. I think our country is unfortunately not tapping into and leveraging this unique opportunity that it has. We've spoken about how small we are. Gambia is a country that can literally serve as a pilot for Africa. It can serve as a Singapore for Africa and how a nation can actually develop. And with that development, the Gambia can depend on our diaspora because yes, we're so small and our diaspora is so small, but in comparison to other African nations, in remittance, but also in social remittance, we contribute significantly. And I think for a lot of us, it can be frustrating where you're like, I want to contribute, I want to come in. When you came in wanting to help the infrastructure in the power and electricity sector, you were not able to do that. I'm sure you've also had your pain points. What is this hindrance and how can we address that to carry them along, because we can't do it alone? And as you've said, like, you are not thinking about Gambia today, you're thinking about Gambia in 2050. But we know that to get that 2050 Gambian, you need to collaborate with people and you need to collaborate with those who are resistant. How do we get their buy-in? How do we carry them along? How do we meet them where they are and create these allyships? Thoughts? That's a loaded one.
Yeah, I think it just starts with the mindset. In my opinion, I feel like some of us, I don't want to speak for everyone, are still in the colonial, wrapped into this colonial mindset still, and we have foreigners coming in and they see value there rather than when a diasporan comes in, and Gambian as well, like maybe seeing value more from our people and just knowing that, we are educated, we have the right tools and skills, just like our counterparts who are from other countries. Because even sometimes these foreigners from the other countries don't even have those skills. What they have is their skin color, that they bring in. And I'm not trying to, it's just reality in any African country you go to. And I feel like, we need to change our laws to favor the diasporans and Gambian people before the foreigners. Maybe this might be controversial, but
No, that's not controversial.
But you see, even for me, like I was trying to apply to jobs in Kenya when I first moved back, for example. But even in their application forms, they try to ensure that they're empowering people who are Kenyan or have some form of Kenyan background first before giving chance to others from other countries. And even when it comes to like entrepreneurship as well, providing like tools and I forgot the word again, but in terms of like, sorry, she might need to cut this.
No, it's okay. Resources?
Yeah, resources. It's not even resources. It's why is this? Like in terms of like giving, like for example, the investment clause. I forgot the name of the
Policies, laws, no.
not regulations. Okay, it's too early now.
Yes.
But basically, just giving entrepreneurs the tools and resources from Gambia, and then some of the laws, like even when it comes to investment, that there's the amount being that you need in order to get incentives.
Yeah, incentives, yeah.
You have to get incentives. It's a little bit higher, even for the Gambian, not even the diaspora, for example, even for the Gambian man or woman. So I think it's maybe creating incentives that would favor, people from the Gambia in order to and diaspora in order to enable them to be able to do like business easier here or navigate, the Gambia as well. So I think that's something that maybe people can work with the government, maybe I don't want to say educate or share knowledge, I would say. Share knowledge with them on how to go about this, because I feel like a lot of Gambians are in high positions out there.
Yes, yes, yes,
Like,
yes.
you know, I just recently found out the ECOWAS president is Gambian. That is crazy. Like, so I feel like we should leverage the knowledge we have, bring it back, create these policies, these incentives that would favor people coming back, creating businesses and changing, you know, Gambia.
No, I like what you said, and especially the last part about being how small we are as a country, you will find Gambians thriving outside in every sector. Like we do very well. We have capacity. And in immigration, there's this concept of brain drain, especially with the diaspora. And it basically means that when highly talented, educated people from countries travel elsewhere to give their skills because of a lack of opportunities, and that creates a brain drain. But what we're seeing with folks like ourselves who are coming back is the brain gain. You get those skills and then you come back and you try to transfer them and to fit them into the local infrastructures on where you are. However, as you said, it can be very challenging, especially for the private sector. I think one thing that we can leverage from in our country is having a strong, thriving private sector, which we don't have. And we don't have the infrastructure in place, from regulations, from policies to and laws, and also incentives. And you spoke about the importance of like this localization and bringing in folks that are Gambian, right? And prioritizing them. This is not something unique to any country. I mean, I don't think it's not discriminatory, actually. You can do it in a way that's quite equitable because you're taking care of your citizens. And I remember this week I listened to this very radical activist talking about the foreign aid shift in America and saying that this is actually a great thing because now our private sectors need to be empowered so that they can give those services, right? Our governments need to collaborate with our private sectors because Africa, we have enough. Even through South to South cooperation, like Africa to Africa cooperation, we have enough resources to have those exchanges. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, Ismail.
Yeah, you know, I think even when we talk about, I use two terms, non-Gambians for Black people. Any Black person, you're non-Gambian, and then foreigners of a different ethnicity, because I feel like Black people all over the world have to reclaim Africa. But I think most people, before they come to a place, they study the psychology of the people. I think that's why most foreigners succeed in Africa, because they go and there's not a Gambian code. What's our code? And what I mean code where Ghana, even Senegal, there's a line where, no, at least Senegal, Senegal first, Senegal. How am I mean? We don't have a code. So even if you look at from an economic standpoint, I'm not an economist at all. People come to Gambia to harvest. They don't come to Gambia to sow seeds and nurture them. Which is why even investments always go towards not service industry, but products and consumer industry. So even if you look at the remittance, I think it was like half of the money went to construction. Who owns the industry? So no matter we say it's a Gambian diaspora economy, the money's not staying here. They're not sending money to Gambia. They're sending money elsewhere and passing it through Gambia. So it comes in and out. So there has to be a level of awareness in terms of, okay, how are we gonna participate from an economic standpoint? And that's why our human development doesn't grow. Because most people that come to harvest don't come to invest in human development. And now they bring in their own human beings.
Yes, yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
But also the diaspora, yes, we always say that it's difficult coming home, but I think we also need to elevate our level of consciousness as Gambians in the diaspora to see, like them. Where is it going? Why is it going there? But also, how are we, from a private sector standpoint, we know you guys know about access to capital, non-existent. Worst place to do business. Most investors will tell you Gambia has all the problems of Africa in a small market and bad regulation. The risk is too high. But also now Gambians are looking like people like me, who, if you follow the diaspora story, sold my house, liquidated my 401k, left a good job. You come home, you invest almost $500,000 in a business, and on any given day, one Gambian could decide to do fee. And then you lose. And then the society moves on. Like, that was so sad, X, Y, and Z. But a foreigner have a problem, brown envelope, problem goes away. The media won't even know about it. So I think we always have to see it about what's our responsibility? How do we change? How do we create people that are growers, nurturers, builders, versus people that are coming to harvest? Because even average Gambian, when they're spending, we spend unconsciously. How many people wake up every day and decide, I'm going to decide who's going to get my money?
Yeah, I definitely agree, actually. And just while you were talking, I was thinking, And just I said a statement back about foreigners, you know, and then giving Gambians opportunity. But if you're a foreigner, I mean, of course you're welcome here as long as you're contributing to the economy, right? And as long as you're creating systems that would benefit people, like hiring Gambians, training people, you know, increasing the skill force, you know, and the knowledge that people can gain from you coming in with a new business that maybe it was never in the Gambia that could benefit the Gambia long term. But I feel like we should definitely try to find a way to keep, like you mentioned, the money in the Gambia, because if you are a foreigner, you can't take your money back to the banks outside, because the money they're getting also to invest is not from Gambia's, right? So it's not like they're getting debt from banks here and then they're giving it back. It's going back somewhere else, and the profits too are going back somewhere else. So
even better, their country's banks are giving them cheap capital to come to Gambia to extract and remove it. That's what's happening in most industries, right? I go to a bank, they're telling me 19-22% in Gambia.
maybe.
If I was of another nationality, they say, hey, Gambia, people like buying a lot of rice. And everybody's buying cement. Here goes $2 million. Go to the market, 4% interest, and just bring back 3.5 million, right? They come with so much resources, you can't compete.
You can't compete.
And the job is not to grow, because it's not their responsibility to build a country. I see any business person, you are a for-profit mechanism who sees a country with a lot of problems, with bad systems, and you could always find one right person and you're covered from a business standpoint. So we are at a competitive disadvantage in terms of the private sector, period. It's very difficult for you to do things the right way in Gambia as a private sector and win.
And I think that, let's even put the banks aside, I think we need to change as Gambian people in terms of thinking about investing. Like, I feel like we need to look into investing more. I think private capital is important, because I think foreigners, not necessarily they're getting money from just banks, maybe from friends, family, and sometimes schools, right? And just their communities, you know, coming together, putting money together to help support their businesses. Even foreigners that are here, for example, they have communities who put money together to support them. And long term, not short term, they will reap the benefits. So I think it's more of like, you know, the diaspora, yes, they're bringing remittances, but they also need to start like investing,
Getting on cap tables.
Yeah, like getting on cap tables. I feel like, because
Yeah.
I didn't mention this here yet, but I am in the venture capital space now, and you know, I came back looking to see if this was a space for it, but of course we have a long way to go. I think one of the areas that we need to work on is trying to like educate people on investing. And investing doesn't mean short term, it means long term. Sometimes you don't see it, sometimes you lose it. And sometimes as an investor too, you just invest for the good, right? And the impact. It doesn't necessarily have to be a benefit for you. And so I feel like we need to start looking on, you know, contributing even as a community, small checks together to help somebody, like, or a sector, you know, move forward.
Yeah, it's really important, the investment part. And also we've talked about the diaspora in terms of what they bring in remittance. And I know you've all heard this story where we have an uncle or an auntie or parents in the diaspora, and they're like, "Son and Nengsi Yoni Halisbi." We just want them to be able to do it for themselves. And they invest actually, but they do the wrong type of investment because of a lack of knowledge. A lot of times they'll have a brother say, "Okay, how can I empower you? What can I do for you? I want to get into taxi. I want to have a mini market. I want to do this." And they're actually willing to do it. I think it's about bridging that gap and feeding them with the knowledge. Also, those in the diaspora who don't want to move back, but want to invest in the country and support the country, and having mechanisms for them where it's easy to do that. I will even say for myself, before I had thought about moving back, I was like, what can I do in the Gambia? How can I invest? Even with moving back, it was so tough actually, thinking about where do I start? Like, how do I get a job? Where do I get a job? Where do you live? Like, all of those things are things you consider. And we have a huge information gap in our country. And we have the responsibility to make sure that we mitigate that and we create an infrastructure where it's easy to move back. We have a responsibility where we make it attractive to move back, because there are a lot of people who are like us who want to, but they just do not know where to start. And I think that's where we need to also be looking at, and the whole culture of remittance. Like, I mean, what is $100 like per person. And that would do a lot for every person in the diaspora, and not just like their kids too. $100. Imagine what impact that could have if they could invest in it and they benefit their families, but they also benefit themselves. Gambian new investment, all they do is build buildings.
No, land. It's
land. It's land,
But
which is good in terms of investment, the land itself. But as soon as you build, you've lost.
you've lost, and it doesn't continue creating value
No.
for the greater population.
Exactly.
But also, I think some of the problems is us people that are entrepreneurs. They're not making their intentions known to the diaspora. I mean, Innovarx is a classic story. I'm a minority owner in the business. I only own about 41% of the business. Majority, if not 95% of the shareholders are Gambians in the diaspora. So there's actually a willingness to do it, but also there's risk because nobody. Right? The reality is we need to increase the concentration of people that are universally good, not good on Gambia standards. People that should be building institutions should be, I could go to Nigeria and win faster, right? Because the idea that we're bringing in, but also we have to create opportunities to let diasporans into our businesses as investment vehicles, knowing that we have proper structures. We actually have a strategy. We actually have a logic of success. We could win in this market and compete against, yes, foreigners to keep the dollars here, which is why I think you have to be very competitive and be a compatriot to try to fight through the next 10 years of Gambia because most of the sectors we're losing. So, and some of the diaspora should stay. They should not come home because I also very acknowledge the fact that if you are a breadwinner, it is almost like I cannot assume that you have to come home. So even when people call me and ask me advice, I tell them, don't come. It's not worth the risk. And people would think it's crazy. No, Gambia is not worth the risk because you are going to walk away from your earning potential. All of us have a window, middle career. You could earn to set your kids proper. And then you're coming to Gambia is too risky. You may lose everything. And then what? Most of us could have a fallback plan. I go back, wear a white coat. I start making money. But also some of our businesses, half of my revenue comes from Gambian in the diaspora. So I need them to stay there, right? I just want to trade value for their money. And now as more SMEs come, I think we should start making more visible investment opportunities for Gambians in the diaspora.
And I think that when people think investment, sometimes it's more like I'm giving my money out and the profit might not come. But I think when it comes to private investment, you actually are going to be an owner of the company. You'll get shares of the company. So it's not more of like just waiting for some form of profit. You are a co-owner. So
profit may not come, but scared money doesn't make money.
Yeah, and you know, they say high risk equals to high return. We need to be more, looking into risk and just hope, because if you don't take a risk, you will not get a return.
And I think there's a huge risk anyway in the fact that you send money for the past 20 years and you have nothing in return. And it's not actually elevating the socio-economic realities of your family, because what it's doing is creating a culture of dependency. And what happens, God forbid, when you're not here anymore? Your children now inherit that issue. And we've seen that a lot in the diaspora, even for me as a second generation diasporan, where I have friends whose parents have passed away and now they're born and raised in Denmark and they have to carry that burden of supporting their family. And they're like, I'm not doing that. That's not my culture.
No,
what do you mean? And then everything that their parents did, the investment to support the family, gone. So I think if we in the diaspora, those in the diaspora, think about it in that way of what happens when I go? Who's going to take care of my mom that I love? Who's going to take care of my father? Who's going to take care of my siblings that you care about? Because it's all coming from love. And I think that's what the difference is. Our investment through remittance, let's call it investment just now, it's through love.
Is it investments or obligation?
Investments or obligation. But it's a black tax. It's a black tax, but I think a lot of times, and just from my experience, I can say, I know it's quite nuanced, but a lot of it, it's from a place of love. It's a place of I care about my family. I have an obligation obligation to do that because we also have folks in the diaspora who they do what they need to do, right? And yes, it could be obligation. It could be a mixture of many different things. But if you love your family, you want your family to thrive, you want your country to thrive, then look at investing in a different way. Look at making them resilient. Look at sustainability. Look at the independence, because those are things that they say. But again, I think that they just don't know how to do it.
Are their children gonna love Gambia or care about Gambia?
It depends. It really depends on how you raise your kids and if your kids are interested, because you have to, I am not born in Gambia like both of you are, but I know that my parents made a very intentional effort of putting that love of Gambia and making sure that I speak Wolof and Mandinka and know my culture and come on holiday and all of those stuff. So I have that connection to Gambia, but not just Gambia, to Africa. Because of when you are in the diaspora, you don't necessarily just identify with Africa. With Gambia, you identify with Africa, and not just Africa, just with Black people.
Black people in general.
Like, when you're all white people in a room and you see that Black person in the corner, I got you, that head nod. And that's the difference. And I think because of that, like you know the importance of collaborating in anything that you're doing. So, my thing is just the how. And I'm very interested in that, because how do we make sure that we put those things in place? We collaborate, even with Africans in the sub-region, like with our brothers in Senegal and sisters in Sierra Leone and in Ghana and Nigeria. How do we bring them in? Because they're also part of this network that can help our country flourish. How can we say that? I know you were talking about the other day, you have a lot of startups that come to Gambia to test and pilot, right? Come to Gambia, we're a small country, come and start, come have your startup here, come employ Gambians, try to do your thing in a small scale, test it, employ us, transfer your skills, contribute to our economy, have the incentives in place where you collaborate with established Gambian businesses that are already here. I feel like we have that opportunity, and my frustration, and I know you've been here for a lot longer than I am, it's like, why is it not happening? Why has it not happened?
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be hard. So no, there's something about change that a few people are going to take most of the arrows. They're going to be the ones who are literally on their backs and knees fighting until a tipping point happens. Because human psychology too, then they want you said, right? What can happen is some of us can't fail. And it's a greater responsibility, because even last year, I went to a point where I thought about shutting down in Gambia because the business ran out of money. And all my investor shareholders are like, just go to Nigeria. It would have been easy. I have a partner in Nigeria. But in that moment, I'm like, if Innovarx fails, then a lot of people, why would they come? Gambia still has healthcare problems. We have an innovative solution. For 5 years, nobody has been able to replicate our business model. Gambian Diasporans are ready to sponsor us. So a few of us have to be the ones to say that, okay, I am going to stay. And then anybody who comes, I'm going to tell you it's going to be difficult. It's going to probably it'll change the way you see your own people. It'll make your heart a little bit callous, but you have to win, because the survival of that 10-year-old Gambian depends on it. So do yomba. It's going to be easy, which is why for every 10 that come, maybe one will stay after 5 years. Because nobody Gambia to me lenko. The reality is, and even if I was 45 years old, there's no way in hell I'm making these sacrifices. Because then my son and daughter becomes my primary responsibility. And then it becomes like a dereliction of duty to take the kind of risk that I've taken in the 5 years. So it has to be the critical mass. And I'm a firm believer that talent of 10th concept by W.E.B. Du Bois, where he believed that it takes 10% of most Black communities to change the community. That's the critical mass. Who are the 10% of diasporas that are ready to come and sacrifice? And our 10% not do it 10% like single in silos. We'd be a 10% that it's together. That we mobilize together, that we advocate for change together, that we inspire the young people to get together. Because social media has really been a hack. Back in the day in diaspora, that $5 card that you'll have to call and then it always steals your minutes, right? You don't hear nothing about Gambia. Now, Gambia, it's everywhere all over the world.
Yeah, true.
So leveraging social media to evangelize. And that's why I tell people, don't build in the dark, unless you're doing shady stuff. Build in public so that people could know what is possible in Gambia. Because if you look at the economic trends as well across Africa, even people that are economic vultures that come to these places that have a lot of problems, the moment there's a critical mass of competence, they didn't come to that market to compete. They came to that market to harvest. The moment the critical mass gets in, they exit and go and find the next vulnerable country. That's just been the pattern ever since colonialism. You just follow the trends. They go somewhere where there's a problem. They find out who they need to grease the palms and do eggs. The moment the people wake up, you leave. So it's just finding that critical mass. And I think it is happening because there's a lot of hope where I meet certain people that want to build, that are building. Then I'm like, we have to stay. We may not be Aliko Dangote. Not through Gambia. You're not going to be a billionaire through Gambia the right way. Right? We don't have the people. Right? It's very difficult for us to have a unicorn in Gambia.
I think it's possible.
From Gambia. Just using the Gambian market.
Yep. Because we're not focusing on the 90%. The reason why Dangote is a billionaire, because he's focusing on the 90%, right? He is sugar. Do we make our own sugar here? No.
Yeah.
Our basic needs. Because if you create something that people use every single day that's recurring, that's a lot of money per day. That's $1 million.
But poverty. And so much of our problems in this country come down to poverty.
But people need to eat, right? People need to go to the bathroom, shower. People, need to wash their clothes. I think I think in Gambia, the reason maybe we've had few unicorns. We do have few unicorns, and those unicorns, if you look back, it's because they are targeting markets where people have to use their products over and over multiple times a day, right? And that's how they get the money. But manufacturing is something that we are lacking, in terms of, adding value to our natural resources and then selling it here, looking at what people actually need every day and creating it. So I think that's the easiest way to be a billionaire if you want to be one. I don't think we've gotten there yet, maybe because of there's not the incentives, investments, opportunities, or financing and stuff. But I think for me, in terms of ways to come together, you mentioned collaboration. I think it's key, right? And collaboration doesn't mean let's just do this together. It's okay, I see you doing this. How can I come in with something else that when we connect, it actually makes the pie bigger? It's not about just keeping the same pie, but how can we make it bigger? And I feel in Gambia, we need to try to collaborate more, creating an ecosystem that helps everybody. The ecosystem is a system where everyone thrives, right? Because everyone's in it. So I think even on the startups, the private side or the startup side, what I've been trying to advocate for more is if you have a delivery company and you're doing the logistics side, you don't have to do the platform. Maybe someone else can say, okay, I don't have to create the same delivery company. It's a small market, but let me try and create this platform that maybe I can collaborate with the delivery company so that when people order from the platform, the delivery company can come in. So you're getting...
You know how many delivery companies opened during COVID?
Yeah, that is not the Gambian way, but that should now maybe what people should now look into, right? It's a very small market. So instead of trying to do something that's successful one person is doing, try to find complementary ways to come in that will make the pie bigger.
And then we all benefit.
We all benefit.
Yes,
and I think we need to start building an ecosystem. I think that's what's lacking here. How can people collaborate in a way of connecting with each other that benefits everybody? I think that's something that I feel will help.
And funded by diaspora. I think
and
them
funded
funding,
by
that's more important than voting too.
But I think it's important. It's important. I think the saying goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And I think a lot of the things boil down to a mindset issue, is the idea that, and the Gambian culture is like that. The Gambian mindset is like that. As we say, we're very suspicious and kasubile, as we say in Mandinka, very paranoid, and we think everybody
and critical.
And critical.
And we tear down things so much faster.
Yes, and we can be quite negative, right? And especially when it comes to business, there's this idea of, if I want to collaborate with Ismail will definitely want to take something. That's why would he come to me?
Exactly.
What does he mean? He's coming to me. We always have this idea,
something
right?
Is up,
Something is up because we're not used to that culture. And because of our background, again, taking it back to that, we're so used to collaborating, and even with the white people. Because you know that if you want your agenda sometimes in a discourse, you need allyship, man. BLM, we all knew what allyship meant we needed those people,
Absolutely.
and we're so comfortable with doing that. And I think that's our superpower. That's the unique thing that we have and we need to get the buy-in. And you talked about like I think voting, yes, is also very important, but in order to actually have real change, and if you want to see that in the ecosystem, right? The ecosystem is large. It's not just the private sector, it's the public sector and everything in between. How do we also make sure that we have folks like us in the public sector working as civil servants? I think if we actually want to see some type of change also, we need to see that critical mass everywhere. We can't just have them in the private sector. It's important, but we need to have ambassadors everywhere, right? And one of the things that I know folks from the diaspora who want to come and be civil servants or work for the government, even including myself, is it worth it? Can I live? Can I survive?
Yeah, it's an
like,
economic
it's
problem.
an economic problem, and
Yeah.
it's also the problem of the resistance that you'll find in that system to go in.
And your morality and integrity will be checked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, I am not in the private sector as you guys are, and I work in development. And one of the things that I would love is actually like to work for your country. I think it's such an honor to serve your country in that way and to be in the
public sector.
In the public
Because private
sector
sector is also serving your
It
country.
is also serving your country, but I think in the public sector, it's in a different way, of course, being a civil servant, and also it's encouraging that collaboration with the private sector, because you need to have that buy-in there, you know, from all of the bodies. We talk about the National Assembly as we had an episode recently about the diaspora, clause 14 being removed, and what does that mean? And then it took us to looking at like, what do other countries do? Let's look at our neighbor, Senegal. Senegal has representation in their parliament that are just seats for the diaspora,
But
right?
why would the National Assembly care about the diasporans being able to vote? That's the question we don't ask oftentimes. What incentive is there for them to share power?
But the thing is, it's not necessarily about an incentive, it's about a right. Because we couldn't today go and say, okay, folks from this constituency have no right to vote. And that's what we're doing when we say the diaspora has no right to vote. So it just boils down to just their right, their fundamental right, regardless of even if they're sending $1 say a month. Because our constitution says that they have the right to vote, then they should be granted that right. We can't take away rights from people, right? It's like if I say our good producer here, Ibrahim, you can't vote. What will you do? So it's about that, and messaging is key. If we want, like you said, psychology, if we have the psychology and the diaspora, they just feel like they're being used. And even like you said, the black tax and the obligation, and whether it's from love, a lot of them just feel like they're being used. Like every month they reluctantly send money and they feel obligated to. And a lot of that obligation comes from a lovely place, but it's now been corrupted by this, I have to, the pressure, right? And then now we're saying you can't vote also. And now we're saying all these type of things, Hamolens and Bopa, you come in here, you're riding bicycles in your country. We see the discourse about
And you can be an MP, because if you have two citizenships,
exactly,
there's a lot of things you can do.
Yes, you can't be an MP, you can't be a minister, for example. There are a lot of things that you cannot be involved with. What message does that send?
Is that
to the
hurting
diaspora?
Gambia?
I think it's hurting Gambia.
Significantly.
And you look at the other countries we talked about, like Ghana, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, like Benin, making intentional efforts to bring in their diaspora, to make it attractive. And when they say diaspora, they don't just mean like Ghanaians, Ghana. Anybody of African descent. And you know how much money they made in 2019, the year of return? Yes, even Rwanda, exactly. And these are the opportunities that we have. We're such a small country, and we have this unique infrastructure, I mean, just naturally also, where we have to collaborate with even the Ministry of Tourism, for example. If we want to see that change, if we want to see the private sector thrive, the Ministry of Tourism needs to be involved in that. The National Assembly needs to be involved with that. Pura has to be involved with that. But if we don't have ambassadors in those places, and we're advocating and we're building our businesses and building, then what foundation are we building on? It's like, it's inevitably going to disintegrate. And that's my fear, where I see, it's my fear, but I also see an opportunity. It's my fear in the sense that I see a lot of us who have this energy and we have conviction and obligation that we feel, that we want to contribute towards our country, we want to contribute to our continent. We know what we have, but then you have that threat, that external threat of, is it even going to work if I don't get the buy-in?
And it shouldn't be martyrdom. I just feel like leaving the West and coming home shouldn't feel like a jihad.
But it does.
And it's
It
just like
does.
after a while, it's not sustainable.
It's not.
Like,
You burn out.
Buddy no be firewood. At some point, you are
it's
going to
not.
wake up and
Yes.
realize, you know what? To hell with this place. And I say that because there are a lot of people that are a little bit older than me that are maybe in their 50s. They woke up and said, to hell with Gambia.
Yeah.
This place could rot and go to hell. My kids are fine. I have an international job. I'm making a ton of money. I'll buy a house. I'll come and retire. But to hell with this place. So we've already lost the entire generation of Gambians in the diaspora because some of those people, their mid-50s, that's when you kind of peak in your career anyways. They're not coming to Gambia to do what? And they're communicating to their children like, that place will never make it.
Yes, yes.
So their children don't even have a love for nation. If anything, their allegiance is shifting. But that's why it's like you can't conform because we are losing so much capital. It's not even financial capital because we're losing that. The money's not staying in the country. But we're also losing the love of the most wealthy Black people in the world are in the West.
Yeah.
The wealthiest Black people in the world are in the United States of America.
Yeah.
So even people, you could track your ancestry DNA and it could say Gambia, which it would not show Gambia, by the way. It'll say Senegal because I did it recently and it said 93% Senegal, 7% Mali. Those people should come home.
Yeah.
And maybe it's radical, but I think Gambia could really benefit from like 100,000 Black people that come with intellectual capital, financial capital, and become Gambians.
Honestly.
That's our
No,
pathway out.
I agree.
We have to dilute
Yes,
Gambia
Yeah.
with highly concentrated talent.
Yeah.
And most of the times that also solves a lot of our societal problems like tribalism, like a lot of the different cultures, because you're elevating society in a way that private sector, public sector, listen, enough people have served public sector in my family. I'm good with that for now. But even public sector in most countries, successful people in private sector get to a point where they transition and start serving.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So there's also that transition that happens
Exactly.
as well. But it's
exactly.
it shouldn't be martyrdom. It shouldn't be martyrdom.
Yeah,
It should be easier because we have a lot of problems to solve.
Yeah, we really have a lot of problems. And I mean, going just back to that, what you mentioned about like folks being here for that 10 years, 15 years, and then you're like demotivated, Gambia doho, dara do doh, you're wasting your time. And we get a lot of that. I mean, I don't know what it's like for you guys, but anytime I have my family and friends back home in Denmark or wherever else in the diaspora, are you still there?
Yeah, same.
Same
here.
Hey, you're just wasting your time. We know you're coming back. And then when you have a little complaint, don't even you may complain to them. So you can't even vent.
Right.
Because anytime you even warning, like, go, Madam Freedom Fighter. You know,
swear.
that's the thing that they'll say. And it's like, and for me, it's that like, I am still in the process because I've been here for it's going to be 3 years in September. And I'm still finding my way through the system here. I still feel the conviction and that obligation more than ever to want to contribute. And I think that the law of attraction really works. Like I've really just found like-minded people. And I'm just about like, how do we take all of this energy and channel it towards change? And I know to channel it towards change, we cannot live and work in our echo chambers.
No, you gotta go out.
We have to go out
You
there.
gotta go out.
We have to go out there. We need to work with the parliamentarians. We need to work with the ministers. We need to work with everybody else, the
And
civil
rural
servants,
Gambia.
and rural Gambia,
I feel like
especially.
you don't need to be like in certain positions
Yeah.
to work with at least on the private side, at least in the public sector, because I feel like, I mean, maybe you can educate me, I'm not aware, but I feel like government can sit down with business owners in different sectors to work on policies.
Yeah,
on,
for sure.
on sectors.
But-
Yeah.
You know,
It's a flaw in the design. Like they gave us statism where government was supposed to do everything. And now most African countries, government shouldn't be in the business of being in business.
Yeah.
But in most African countries, the government is the business.
Yeah.
Right.
Not even in the business side, on the regulation side, because if the government creates a regulation and you're a startup, for example, or a small SME that it doesn't favor, you're dead.
Yeah, but the regulations are not rooted in economic growth. Most regulations are rooted in access to market and competitive advantages. And that's why there's a flaw. Most of our laws and regulations was not made with clear intention. They were not made in good faith. They analyze how do we make this as restrictive as possible for people that are here now, and then it becomes law in the country. So even if you come from outside, and I've lived this perfectly when they tell you, well, this is the law of the Gambia. And I'll say, no, well, this regulation is intentionally designed to make sure people don't have access to the market, but it's the law of the country. And God forbid you have to try to get a law change that's when you start seeing how the system is flawed, because you have to go through, talk to National Assembly members, educate them on the issue. Like, I've been living this whole year, and people will say, well, it's the law of the land. So is it the rule of law? Is it being ruled by law?
But don't you also think that those laws, especially the ones that we have in place now, they're not created by those who are in those seats now? And that's why, like, for me, and when I say about the private sector, public sector, of having folks like us come in, is that I genuinely believe that the only way that we can see that real change is that on the parliament level, that we have people who understand that and see it. And yes, you can work with them, and yes, you can educate with them, and yes, you can build capacity, but the mindset is something that you need to have.
And the courage.
And the courage.
Because you have to have courage of
Yes,
conviction to just use common sense.
Exactly.
Hey guys, this doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
We need to change it, and we're changing it now, but it's because it's for the better of the 10-year-old Gambian.
Yeah.
Not like, well, this is Gambia, countries X, Y, and Z, sovereignty. And I always have an issue when we try to lean on sovereignty, why am I not leaning on dara? It kind of goes both ways, because it's always quick for us to say, well, our country needs laws. I agree, but if the laws are not serving the people who it's designed to make, it's a bad law. True. Right? So regulations is really tough, and it takes a lot of capital from an entrepreneur. We should be spending time on business development.
Yes.
How do we increase service offering?
Yeah.
Not how do we change.
It's true. That's the fact.
Yeah,
and that's
that
why
is true.
it's true. And that's why I really like just going back to the fact of like the only way in which the business person can focus on the business and the policy person can follow on the policy, and the legislators can follow up on that, is that you need to have those ambassadors. And that's a critical mass.
It's a critical
Any
mass.
change that you see, they look at that, the business side, the policy side, the advocacy, activism side. Change. And you cannot just have the change in like, I like a lot of folks are like, let's focus on the private sector. Yes, private sector is important. Why so I'm a thriving private sector? So your public sector is not right.
I don't think it works
It's
anyway.
not going to work.
It can't happen, actually.
It cannot work.
They go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand. And we have to also just think about, that thing of the conviction. And like, sometimes I'm just like, we need a critical mass just to go into the public sector, man, and just be like, let's fix it, let's do it. And you have actually governments who have created incentives to pay a bit better for folks that are coming in because they're given their skills. We pay consultants like thousands and thousands of dollars to work within the public sector. Why don't we use the exceptional people that we have
and
here,
pay them more,
headhunt them and pay them more? You take this, these are your KPIs. You need to build this department within this ministry. Watch them do wonders. You know what I mean? And it's going to benefit who? It benefits everybody in the nation. But that is the mindset issue that we have in this country, and is the thing of like, you're coming into my space. And we have to take that responsibility to open our doors and like have that white flag and like we come in peace. We're literally here because I want to help you so you can help me so we can help everybody. And I think that's one thing that we really need to consider, yes.
If they care.
If they care, yes. And I think we're coming to an end of this episode. I know that on your segment, you're in there, them 2-3 hours.
Man, listen, come to me, it gets deep.
Yes, it gets heated, but we're here towards the end. But I just want to get some final remarks from you guys in terms of what's the way forward and what do we say to our audience that are looking in? And there's 2 folks that I want us to speak to, maybe 3. So the Gambian in the diaspora who does not have an intention to move back, but they want to invest in their country, they're still invested. The Gambian diaspora who wants to move back to the country, and then the Gambians that are here, what can we do to help facilitate that process?
I was going to say you first.
No.
I guess for the Gambian in the diaspora who's not looking to move back, since they're not able to move back, they can still be part of the change. They can still, help create and solve problems, in the country by investing. You can still be an owner and still be part of, a mission for Gambians here who are on the ground trying to solve something. And we have to all be part of this. We have to all be part of this, mission to put our country forward. And so I think investing, it's a high risk, but you'll get high returns, right? And even if you don't get returns, let's just also aim to create impact. If those returns don't go through, at least you can see there's an increase in the workforce, There's some knowledge that has been pumped into because of a certain project. So your money is still not going to waste. I guess for the Gambian looking to move back, coming from me being that person, here you're someone, there you're nobody. You know, the little you do here is a lot to the people here compared to you being a fish in a big pond. So of course it's also like, again, a high risk, but sometimes you don't see the problems you think you want to solve are actually not the problems that are here. So you have to come home and then see it for yourself. And some of us are here to help guide you. So come.
And the Gambians here.
And the Gambians here. Yeah. Yeah, the Gambians here, I guess don't conform in terms of your values, right? Don't in terms of your integrity, in terms of your motivation. I guess just keep those, dear to yourself. Be open to learning. Be open to seeing the other side, just seeing the perspective on the other side. We do have our own, goggles, but sometimes going into the other side will help you figure out a solution or a proposal to help meet halfway. So don't give up. Keep pushing. We need people like us here. If we don't do it, who will? So
So for me, the Gambian in the diaspora, two things. First of all, you are preserving dignity of a lot of Gambians. Yalna Sutura Yaga. And for somebody who's been there, I understand the toll. Be more intentional. Stay there. Earn as much money as you can, because we also need to harvest the resources in Western lands that they took from us. So we need to get as much money from there. Just be more intentional about how you spend in the Gambia. And whenever you get a chance to support a local business in Gambia, make your family members know that you need to spend this in a Gambian business. And the second part is try to create as many Aisha Tambadangs as possible. Your children, try as much as you can to instill a love of nation, because they will be the privileged generation that may not have the responsibilities that you have now. And they should come home as early as possible and work for one of our companies, because we need a lot of talent as well too. But stay there, earn as much money as possible, build wealth there, but just be more intentional, because the Gambian Dalasi is not staying in Gambia. The people that want to come home, don't do it. No, I'm just playing. Reconsider. Make sure you have a strong support system.
Yeah.
For me, call me. I will tell you the little that I know, because for every arrow that I've taken out behind my back, I will tell you how to avoid that arrow. But make sure you have a strong foundation of support in your immediate family members, immediate circles, people that would encourage you, because most of the days you are going to want to stop. And don't think about what you're going to lose, because you're going to lose a lot. It'll affect your personal life. It'll affect your family life. It'll affect your financial life. It'll affect your spiritual life. So you also need to look in the mirror and know that you're physically, spiritually, mentally, financially prepared to come home, because you could live 5 years and you won't be profitable. You'll be coming to build a for-profit company and it feels like you're doing a non-profit, but it's an obligation. And for the Gambians at home, I split it between the two. The older Gambians, just pray for us. Don't praise us. I tell people all the time, I will take prayer more than praise. The younger Gambians, that's where I focus, 25 and under. We have a responsibility to you. And all I would say is we got you guys, because that's what we're that's what we're doing it. It's not for what we'll get in life. And that's not only Gambians in Combo, but Gambians in every single part of the region. We will make sure that you know that there's a Gambia for you. So yeah, those three for me.
Yeah. Do I do it?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Do I go?
You ain't watching this, JJC.
So for the Gambians who are there and in the diaspora and are not looking to come back, I know a lot of them are not able to come back, not because they don't want to. I want to acknowledge that it's because they have a responsibility to stay and to provide. And I thank them for their sacrifices. I thank my mother for her sacrifices, that I can be here today and I can enjoy the labor of what she has worked so hard for. And I want to tell them to keep going. And as we've talked about in this episode, invest differently. You guys have resources. You have this power that we don't have on the ground, and invest in the right places. Let's empower I was about to say black because I'm so used to saying black businesses, but black African businesses, Gambian businesses. Just as you see in the Western world when they have the movements. I mean, we have movements where you say, I know that there's this grocery store, but I'm going to go to the other one because it's an African person. Let's do the same thing here. If you have somebody who's sick in your family, try to find a Gambian hospital, a Gambian clinic, a Gambian business, a service provider who's Gambian, and support them, because what you're doing is you're supporting yourself in return. You're creating a job opportunity for your brother, for your uncle, for your children to come and work. You're strengthening that specific sector. For those who were like myself on the other side and considering to move back home, I would say do your research and plan. You know, it's very important to make sure that you have the capacity to move back mentally, financially, and also physically, and I would even say spiritually, right? It's very important because it's not easy, and you are being reintroduced to a culture that you're not used to. You'll have a lot of shocks. You will have a lot of like imposter syndrome, and you may feel like, do I belong here? Do I not belong here? Because looking like the people is not enough. You think differently, and anytime you're in a room, you're reminded that you're different. And when you're so used to feeling that way anyhow, and you come back because you have the sense of wanting to be around your own people, don't allow that to scare you. And when you come and you feel that clash, there are people that are like you. The Gambia welcomes you, and the Gambia has so much to offer you, and we need your capacity, we need your skills, we need your ideas, and we need you to strengthen the country that we have. So the Gambians that are here on the ground, we acknowledge the great work that you have done, the great work that you have done in the sense that we're even able to come here and have this inspiration to want to come. We must acknowledge that there has been something that's been done. We're not like, you know, completely wretched. And that's why we're here today. You have built institutions, you have built businesses, you have built an infrastructure that we also want to leverage, and we want to strengthen. We want to strengthen the wisdom and the work that you've already done. And we can only do that if you allow us to come and work with you. So we ask for that. I guess those are my 3
Amen
points.
to that. I endorse that message.
Can you talk about the outfits?
The outfits?
The purple.
Oh, the purple, yes. We want to acknowledge that we're all wearing purple.
This was not planned.
It was not planned.
It's the color of return.
There
when
you
you're
go.
coming back to Gambia and the airport, wear purple and we will find you.
Yes.
Purple is the color of royalty too.
Exactly.
You know?
And thank you very much for listening to this segment and
Awesome.
insight.
for
And you
having
can
us.
find the great work that Jainaba is doing. You're on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
and
Jainaba
then
Njie.
Jainaba Njie, we'll put it in the descriptions, and continue to listen to our
I'm
fabulous
all over the place.
Kamke Jambar, which is just amazing. We love the show, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Peace. Bye.